Look at him, a straight beggar. The sharp laughter echoed through the opulent ballroom, shattering the night's supposed magic. Taehyung, clad in worn-out clothes and head bowed, could only clench his fists, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. The night, the company's grand anniversary celebration, was meant to be unforgettable. Instead, his far-from lavish appearance had turned him into a spectacle of ridicule. Camera flashes and whispered snide remarks intensified his humiliation. Taehyung felt like a hunted animal, surrounded by predators ready to pounce. He questioned his worth, wondering what he had done to deserve such treatment. Amidst the chaos, a man with a commanding aura and piercing gaze observed Taehyung from afar. Jungkook, the esteemed young CEO, sensed something amiss. He couldn't reconcile the cruelty of the people he had respected. With determined strides, Jungkook pushed through the crowd, reaching Taehyung, who stood isolated in a corner. He took Taehyung's hand and led him to the center stage, where all eyes were fixed on them. Tonight, I want to introduce someone very special to me, Jungkook announced, his voice ringing out, ignoring the bewildered stares and murmurs. This is Kim Taehyung, my beloved younger brother. Jungkook's words struck the crowd like lightning. The guests fell silent, disbelief etched on their faces. How could a disheveled outcast be the brother of a wealthy CEO? What secrets lay hidden beneath this unexpected revelation? Taehyung was equally stunned, his eyes wide with confusion and questions. He had never known he had such an influential brother. That night, Taehyung experienced not only humiliation, but also a life-altering revelation. He was unaware that his encounter with Jungkook would be the beginning of a perilous journey filled with mystery, intrigue, and danger. The ballroom buzzed with a newfound tension. Jungkook's declaration hung in the air, a heavy, unspoken question mark. Taehyung, still reeling, felt a whirlwind of emotions. Disbelief, confusion, and a flicker of something akin to hope, quickly smothered by years of ingrained self-doubt. He looked at Jungkook, searching for any hint of deception, but found only a resolute gaze, a silent promise. Taehyung, Jungkook began, his voice softer now. We have much to discuss, but not here. He led Taehyung through a side door, away from the prying eyes of the guests, into a dimly lit private study. The room, lined with leather-bound books and antique furniture, exuded an air of old money and hidden secrets. I know this is overwhelming, Jungkook said, closing the door behind them. But I need you to trust me. There are things you don't know, things about your past, our past, that have been kept from you. Taehyung, still struggling to process everything, could only nod. What things? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Jungkook hesitated, his eyes reflecting a deep sadness. Our parents, they weren't who you thought they were. They were involved in something dangerous, something that led to their disappearance. The word disappearance hung in the air, heavy with unspoken dread. Taehyung had always been told his parents died in a car accident. But the way Jungkook said it, the weight in his voice, suggested something far more sinister. What do you mean, disappearance? Taehyung asked, his heart pounding. They were taken, Jungkook said, his voice low, by people who wanted something they had. Something that now, I fear they want from you. A chill ran down Taehyung's spine. He had always felt like an outsider, like he didn't belong. But the idea that his entire life was built on a lie, that he was somehow connected to something dangerous, was beyond comprehension. I don't understand, Taehyung said, his voice trembling. What could they want from me? Jungkook sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. I don't know everything yet, but I know they've been watching you, waiting for the right moment. The incident tonight, it wasn't a coincidence. They wanted to see how you would react, how much you knew. Who are they? Taehyung asked, his voice laced with fear. Jungkook's expression hardened. They're a powerful organization, shrouded in secrecy. They operate in the shadows, pulling the strings of those in power. They are ruthless, and they won't stop until they get what they want. As Jungkook spoke, the atmosphere in the study grew heavy, charged with unspoken danger. Taehyung felt a sense of dread creeping into his bones, a feeling that his life was about to change irrevocably. Suddenly, a sharp knock echoed through the room. Jungkook tensed, his eyes darting to the door. "Stay here," he whispered, drawing a small, silver pistol from his jacket. "Don't make a sound." He opened the door cautiously, revealing a tall, imposing figure in a dark suit. "Mr. John," the man said, his voice smooth and menacing. "We need to talk." Jungkook's eyes narrowed. "About what?" "About your brother," the man said, his gaze shifting to the shadows behind Jungkook. "We have certain interests in him." Before Jungkook could react, the man lunged forward, a glint of steel flashing in his hand. The room erupted in a flurry of motion, the sound of a struggle filling the air. Taehyung, hidden in the shadows, watched in terror as his newfound brother fought for his life. Episode 3: Echoes of Betrayal. The struggle was brutal, a silent ballet of violence played out in the dimly lit study. Jungkook, despite his composure, was clearly outmatched in raw strength. The intruder, a hulking figure with cold, calculating eyes, moved with a practiced efficiency that spoke of years spent in the shadows. The silver glint of a knife flickered in the dim light, a deadly dance against Jungkook's desperate defense. Taehyung, paralyzed by fear and confusion, watched from the shadows, his heart pounding against his ribs. The realization that his life, and the life of this man who claimed to be his brother, was in imminent danger, shattered the remnants of his carefully constructed reality. He had to do something. A heavy, ornate paperweight, shaped like a falcon, lay on the desk beside him. With a surge of adrenaline, Taehyung grabbed it, the cold, smooth stone a stark contrast to the heat of his fear. He moved silently, a ghost in the shadows, his eyes fixed on the struggle. As the intruder gained the upper hand, pinning Jungkook against the wall, Taehyung struck. The paperweight connected with the back of the man's head with a sickening thud. The intruder staggered, his eyes widening in surprise, before collapsing to the floor. Jungkook, breathing heavily, turned to Taehyung, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and concern. "You shouldn't have," he gasped, but the warmth in his gaze belied his words. "I couldn't just watch," Taehyung replied, his voice trembling. He looked at the unconscious man, a wave of nausea washing over him. He'd never hurt anyone before. The brief respite was shattered by the sound of approaching footsteps. Jungkook quickly dragged the intruder behind the desk, his movements swift and decisive. "We have to go. Now," he said, grabbing Taehyung's arm. They slipped out of the study through a hidden passage, a narrow, winding corridor that led to the back of the building. The air was thick with the scent of dust and old wood, a stark contrast to the opulent ballroom they had just left. "Where are we going?" Taehyung asked, his voice barely audible above the pounding of his heart. "To a safe house," Jungkook replied, his eyes scanning the shadows. "We can't stay here. They'll be looking for us." As they navigated the labyrinthine corridors, Jungkook explained the situation in more detail. The organization, known only as the Syndicate, was a powerful and secretive group with a long reach. They had been searching for something that Taehyung's parents had possessed, something that was now believed to be in Taehyung's possession. "But I don't have anything," Taehyung protested, his mind reeling. "I don't know anything about this." "That's what they think," Jungkook said, his voice grim. "They believe you hold the key to unlocking their secrets, and they won't hesitate to kill to get it." The safe house was a secluded cabin nestled deep in the mountains, a stark contrast to the luxurious world Taehyung had briefly glimpsed. The silence was heavy, broken only by the crackling of the fireplace. Jungkook, his expression grave, began to reveal more about their past, about the lies and betrayals that had shaped their lives. He told Taehyung about their parents, not the loving figures Taehyung remembered, but spies, caught in a web of intrigue and danger. He spoke of the Syndicate, a group that operated outside the law, their influence stretching into the highest echelons of power. As the night wore on, Taehyung felt the weight of his past crashing down on him. The comfortable lies he had lived by were shattered, replaced by a harsh reality of betrayal and danger. He looked at Jungkook, his newfound brother, and wondered if he could trust him. Was he a protector or another player in this deadly game? Suddenly, a sharp, metallic click echoed through the cabin. Jungkook's eyes widened, his hand moving instinctively towards the pistol tucked into his waistband. "They found us," he whispered, his voice laced with dread. The metallic click, a sound that sliced through the quiet mountain air, was the unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked. Jungkook, his face grim, moved with a practiced swiftness, extinguishing the fire in the hearth, plunging the cabin into near darkness. "Stay behind me," he whispered to Taehyung, his voice low and urgent. The silence that followed was thick with tension, a suffocating blanket of dread. Then, a series of sharp, rhythmic knocks echoed from the front door. Not a casual greeting, but a calculated, almost militaristic signal. Jungkook's grip tightened on his pistol. "They're not here to talk," he muttered. He moved to the window, peering cautiously through the frosted glass. Outside, the snow-covered landscape was a stark, white canvas illuminated by the pale moonlight. Silhouettes moved among the trees, dark shapes against the pristine snow. "They've surrounded us," Jungkook confirmed, his voice tight. Taehyung, his heart hammering against his ribs, felt a wave of icy fear wash over him. He had never been in a situation like this, never faced such palpable danger. He looked at Jungkook, searching for reassurance, but found only a mask of grim determination. "We need to find another way out," Jungkook said, his eyes scanning the cabin. He moved to a bookshelf, running his fingers along the spines of the old, leather-bound books. "There has to be something." He pressed a hidden latch, and a section of the bookshelf swung open, revealing a narrow, hidden passage. "This leads to an old mining tunnel," he explained. "It's our only chance." They slipped into the passage, the darkness swallowing them whole. The air was cold and damp, the silence broken only by the sound of their own breathing. The tunnel sloped downwards, winding its way through the mountain's depths. As they moved deeper into the darkness, Jungkook began to explain the cryptic clues left by their parents. "They knew they were being watched," he said. "They left a trail, a cipher, hidden in plain sight. It's what the syndicate is after." "A cipher?" Taehyung asked, his voice echoing in the tunnel. "What kind of cipher?" "A series of symbols, hidden in art, music, anything they could use," Jungkook replied. "They knew we would find it, eventually." The tunnel opened into a large cavern, the walls glistening with moisture. In the center of the cavern, a single beam of moonlight illuminated a strange, metallic object. It was a small, ornate box, covered in intricate carvings. "This," Jungkook said, his voice filled with awe, "this is part of the cipher." As he reached for the box, a sudden, sharp sound echoed through the cavern. A gunshot. The bullet ricocheted off the wall, sending sparks flying. Jungkook recoiled, his hand flying to his side. "They followed us," he hissed, his eyes narrowed. From the shadows, figures emerged, their faces obscured by masks. They moved with a silent, deadly grace, their weapons glinting in the moonlight. "Give us the box," a voice echoed through the cavern, cold and devoid of emotion. "And we might let you live." Jungkook, his eyes fixed on the figures, drew his pistol. "You'll have to take it," he said, his voice steady. The cavern erupted in a flurry of gunfire. Taehyung, caught in the crossfire, felt a surge of adrenaline. He had to act. He noticed a loose rock on the cavern wall, and with a desperate surge of strength, he pried it free. As the masked figures advanced, he hurled the rock, striking one of them in the head. The figures staggered, giving Jungkook a brief opening. They moved together, a desperate dance of survival in the echoing cavern. Jungkook fired with precision, while Taehyung, using the shadows and his quick reflexes, tried to create distractions. The fight was brutal and chaotic. They were outmatched, outnumbered, and outgunned. But they had the cipher, and they had each other. As the last masked figure fell, Jungkook collapsed, his breath ragged. He looked at Taehyung, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and determination. "We need to go," he gasped. "Now." Jungkook, his side bleeding, leaned heavily on Taehyung as they stumbled through the winding tunnels, the echoes of gunfire fading into the cavern's depths. The ornate box, the cipher, was clutched tightly in Taehyung's hand, a tangible weight of mystery and danger. The air was thick with the metallic tang of blood and the lingering scent of gunpowder. "We need to find a way out," Jungkook gasped, his voice strained. "There's an old exit further down, if it's still there." The tunnels, once a lifeline for miners, now served as their escape route, a labyrinth of darkness and uncertainty. Taehyung, his mind racing, tried to ignore the growing fear that gnawed at him. He had to keep moving, had to keep Jungkook alive. They emerged into a hidden chamber, a small, damp space that reeked of stale water and decay. A rusted ladder, clinging to the wall, led upwards, disappearing into the darkness above. "This is it," Jungkook said, his voice barely a whisper. "The old ventilation shaft. It leads to the surface." Taehyung helped Jungkook onto the ladder, the injured man's weight a heavy burden. They climbed in silence, the only sound the creaking of the rusted metal and the ragged breaths of the wounded man. They emerged into a dense forest, the moon casting long, eerie shadows among the trees. The cold night air stung Taehyung's lungs, a stark contrast to the damp, stale air of the tunnels. "We need to find shelter," Jungkook said, his voice weak. "And we need to decipher that box." They found a small, abandoned hunter's cabin, hidden deep within the woods. The cabin, though dilapidated, offered a semblance of safety, a temporary refuge from the relentless pursuit. As Jungkook tended to his wound, Taehyung examined the ornate box. The carvings were intricate, a series of strange symbols that seemed to writhe and shift in the dim light of the cabin's lantern. "What do these symbols mean?" Taehyung asked, his voice filled with curiosity and apprehension. Jungkook, his face pale with pain, looked at the box. "They're a code," he said, "a language of secrets. Our parents created it, a way to hide their knowledge from a syndicate." He explained the basic structure of the cipher, a complex system of symbols and patterns that required a key to decipher. The key, he believed, was hidden within Taehyung's memories, fragmented pieces of his childhood that had been deliberately suppressed. "They knew you would have to remember," Jungkook said, his eyes fixed on Taehyung. "They knew you were the key." Taehyung felt a surge of confusion and fear. His memories were a blur, a collection of vague impressions and half-formed images. He had no recollection of any codes or symbols. "I don't remember anything," he said, his voice laced with frustration. "My memories are blank." Jungkook sighed, his eyes filled with sympathy. "They were erased," he said. "The syndicate, they wanted to make sure you didn't remember, but they can be recovered." He produced a small, silver locket, its surface engraved with the same symbols as the box. "This was your mother's," he said. "It contains a memory chip, a record of your past. It might help you remember." As Taehyung opened the locket, a wave of dizziness washed over him. Images flashed before his eyes, fragmented scenes of his childhood, distorted and surreal. He saw faces, heard voices, but they were all distant, like echoes in a dream. Suddenly, a sharp, piercing pain erupted in his head. He cried out, clutching his temples, as the images intensified, becoming clearer, more vivid. He saw a room, filled with strange devices and glowing screens. He saw his parents, their faces etched with worry and fear. And he saw a symbol, a complex pattern of lines and shapes, etched into a wall. The pain subsided, leaving him breathless and disoriented. He looked at Jungkook, his eyes filled with a newfound clarity. "I saw it," he said, his voice trembling. "The symbol. It was on a wall, in a room, a laboratory, I think." Jungkook's eyes widened. "That's it," he said, his voice filled with excitement. "That's the key. You remembered." Suddenly, the cabin door burst open, crashing against the wall. Figures, clad in black, stormed into the room, their weapons drawn. "They found us again," Jungkook hissed, his eyes filled with dread. The cabin, once a sanctuary, transformed into a battleground. The masked figures, their movements precise and deadly, advanced with ruthless efficiency. Jungkook, despite his injury, moved with a desperate ferocity, shielding Taehyung with his body. The air crackled with the sound of gunfire, the sharp reports echoing through the dense forest. Taehyung, his mind still reeling from the recovered memories, felt a surge of adrenaline. He couldn't just stand by and watch Jungkook fight. He had to act. He grabbed a heavy, cast-iron skillet from the hearth, its weight a comforting solidity in his trembling hands. As one of the figures lunged towards Jungkook, Taehyung swung the skillet, the impact sending the assailant stumbling back. Jungkook seized the opportunity, his pistol barking, sending another figure crashing to the floor. The fight was a chaotic dance of desperation and survival. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they fought with a fierce determination, driven by the need to protect the cipher and uncover the truth. The cabin, riddled with bullet holes, offered little protection. They had to escape. Jungkook, his face grim, grabbed Taehyung's arm. "We need to move," he said, his voice strained. "They won't stop coming." They slipped out of the cabin through a back window, disappearing into the darkness of the forest. The pursuit was relentless, the sounds of their pursuers echoing through the trees. They moved swiftly, their footsteps muffled by the soft earth and fallen leaves. As they ran, Taehyung's mind raced, piecing together the fragmented memories. The laboratory, the symbols, the fear etched on his parents' faces. He felt a sense of urgency, a need to understand the secrets that had shaped his life. They reached a hidden clearing, a small, secluded space surrounded by towering trees. Jungkook, his breath ragged, leaned against a tree trunk. "We need a rest," he said, his voice barely audible. As they caught their breath, Taehyung examined the cipher box, the symbols now seeming to pulse with a strange energy. He remembered the symbol from his memory, the complex pattern of lines and shapes. He traced the symbol on the box, feeling a strange resonance, a connection to the past. Suddenly, the box began to glow, the symbols illuminating the darkness. A hidden compartment slid open, revealing a small, crystalline device. "What is that?" Taehyung asked, his voice filled with awe. Jungkook's eyes widened. "It's a resonance key," he said. "It amplifies the signal from the cipher, allowing us to access the hidden data." He explained that the cipher wasn't just a code. It was a data storage device, a repository of information that the syndicate desperately wanted. The resonance key was the only way to access it. As Jungkook activated the device, a holographic projection flickered to life, displaying a series of complex diagrams and encrypted data streams. Taehyung recognized some of the symbols, the ones he had seen in his memory. "This is it," he said, his voice trembling. "This is what they were hiding." The holographic projection revealed a network of secret facilities, hidden research projects, and encrypted financial transactions. It was a glimpse into the syndicate's operations, a web of power and corruption that stretched across the globe. Suddenly, the projection flickered, displaying a live feed from a hidden camera. It showed a room, a laboratory, filled with strange devices and glowing screens. And in the center of the room, a familiar figure stood, their face obscured by shadows. "That's them," Jungkook hissed, his eyes filled with dread. "They're close." The feed cut out, replaced by a message, "Your time is up." The clearing erupted in a flurry of gunfire. The masked figures, their faces illuminated by the flashes of their weapons, emerged from the shadows, their movements swift and deadly. They had found them. The clearing became a chaotic tableau of gunfire and desperate maneuvers. Jungkook, his movements hampered by his injury, fought with a grim determination, his pistol barking in the darkness. Taehyung, armed with the resonance key and the remnants of his recovered memories, moved with a newfound agility, his instincts honed by the life-or-death situation. The holographic projection, now a flickering beacon in the darkness, displayed the syndicate's network, a map of their hidden operations. They knew the syndicate was close, too close, and the data they held was a ticking time bomb. "We need to get out of here," Jungkook yelled, his voice strained above the gunfire. "They'll be bringing reinforcements." They retreated deeper into the forest, the masked figures hot on their heels. The resonance key, still glowing faintly, served as both a guide and a target. They had to protect it, had to protect the secrets it held. They reached a steep ravine, a natural barrier that offered a moment's respite. Jungkook, his breath ragged, leaned against a rock, his eyes scanning the darkness. "We can't outrun them forever," he said. "We need a plan." Taehyung, his mind racing, remembered the laboratory from his vision, the strange devices and glowing screens. He had a feeling, a gut instinct, that the lab held the answers they were looking for. "The lab," Taehyung said, his voice firm. "We need to go there. It's where they're keeping the information." Jungkook hesitated, his eyes filled with doubt. "It's too risky," he said. "It'll be heavily guarded." "It's our only chance," Taehyung insisted. "We need to know what they're planning." As they argued, a new wave of figures emerged from the shadows, their weapons trained on them. They were trapped. A figure, taller and more imposing than the others, stepped forward, their face still obscured by a mask. Their voice, cold and devoid of emotion, echoed through the ravine. "Give us the device," they commanded, "and we will let you walk away." Jungkook, his eyes narrowed, raised his pistol. "You think we're fools?" he said. "We know what you're planning." The figure chuckled, a chilling sound that sent a shiver down Taehyung's spine. "You know nothing," they said. "You're just pawns in a game you don't understand." Before Jungkook could react, the figure lunged forward, their movements swift and deadly. A struggle ensued, a blur of motion in the darkness. Suddenly, a shot rang out, and Jungkook cried out in pain, clutching his arm. Taehyung, his heart pounding, watched in horror as his brother collapsed to the ground. The figure turned to Taehyung, their eyes glinting in the darkness. "Now," they said, their voice laced with menace. "Give us the device." Taehyung, his mind reeling, felt a surge of rage. He wouldn't let them take it. He wouldn't let them hurt Jungkook. He activated the resonance key, the holographic projection flaring to life, illuminating the ravine. The symbols on the device pulsed with energy, creating a blinding flash of light. The figures recoiled, their eyes shielded against the sudden brightness. Taehyung seized the opportunity, grabbing Jungkook's arm and dragging him towards the edge of the ravine. "We're going to the lab," he said, his voice firm. "We're going to end this." They jumped, plunging into the darkness below, the sounds of their pursuers echoing behind them. The plunge into the ravine was a desperate gamble, a chaotic descent into the unknown. They landed with a jarring thud, the impact jarring Jungkook's already wounded arm. Taehyung, adrenaline coursing through his veins, helped Jungkook to his feet, the resonance key still clutched tightly in his hand. The ravine floor was a tangle of rocks and dense undergrowth, a natural maze that offered a temporary reprieve from their pursuers. The sounds of their descent echoed through the narrow passage, but the figures above seemed hesitant to follow. "We need to find a way out," Taehyung said, his voice strained. "And we need to find the lab." Jungkook, his face pale with pain, nodded. "There's an old service tunnel. Further down," he said, his voice weak. "It should lead us to the facility." They moved cautiously, their footsteps muffled by the soft earth. The tunnel, damp and claustrophobic, wound its way through the rock, the air thick with the scent of mildew and decay. As they navigated the darkness, Taehyung's mind raced, piecing together the fragmented memories and the holographic projections. The Syndicate's network was vast, their influence reaching into every corner of society. He felt a growing sense of urgency, a need to expose their secrets and dismantle their power. They emerged into a large, cavernous space, the air humming with a low thrum of machinery. The service tunnel had led them to the heart of the facility, a hidden laboratory deep within the mountain. The lab was a maze of glowing screens, complex machinery, and strange, pulsating devices. The air crackled with energy, the atmosphere thick with a sense of hidden power. "This is it," Taehyung whispered, his voice filled with awe and apprehension. "This is where they're keeping the information." They moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the vast space. The holographic projection from the resonance key flickered to life, displaying a map of the facility, highlighting a central control room. "That's where we need to go," Jungkook said, his voice barely audible. That's where they'll have all the data. They reached the control room, a circular chamber filled with a wall of screens displaying encrypted data streams and live feeds from various locations. In the center of the room, a large, crystalline device pulsed with energy, its light casting eerie shadows across the walls. "That's the core," Jungkook said, his eyes fixed on the device. "That's where they're storing everything." As they approached the core, a figure emerged from the shadows, their face still obscured by a mask. Their voice, cold and devoid of emotion, echoed through the room. "You shouldn't have come here," they said. "You've seen too much." Taehyung, his eyes fixed on the figure, felt a surge of recognition. He knew that voice, that cold, calculating tone. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice trembling. "What do you want?" The figure chuckled, a chilling sound that sent a shiver down Taehyung's spine. "You wouldn't understand," they said. "You're just a pawn, a tool to be used and discarded." Before Taehyung could react, the figure lunged forward, their movements swift and deadly. A struggle ensued, a blur of motion in the dimly lit control room. Jungkook, despite his injury, fought with a desperate ferocity, shielding Taehyung from the figure's attacks. Taehyung, his mind racing, tried to decipher the data streams on the screens, searching for a way to disable the core. As the struggle intensified, Taehyung noticed a pattern in the energy pulses of the core, a rhythmic sequence that seemed to correspond to the symbols on the resonance key. He realized that the key wasn't just a data retrieval device. It was also a weapon. He activated the key, focusing its energy on the core. The symbols on the device pulsed with light, creating a blinding flash that filled the room. The core began to overload, its energy spiraling out of control. The figure recoiled, their mask falling away, revealing a familiar face. "You!" Taehyung gasped, his voice filled with shock. "It was you all along." The figure's eyes, filled with rage and desperation, fixed on Taehyung. "You've ruined everything," they hissed. "You'll pay for this." The core exploded, sending a shockwave through the room. The facility shook, the walls trembling as the energy spiraled out of control.